Okay, go for it.
Okay. So, welcome back, everyone. This is session number 3 out of 6. So, we're halfway there. And today's session is really about looking at kids and trying to figure out a little bit more about why they do what they do and having a better understanding of them and where they're kind of coming from. So today we just wanted to start by if everyone is willing to, or anyone is willing to, share maybe some of your thoughts or ideas of things that you did in the last couple weeks with your kids, because we talked about really spending at least 10 minutes a day, uninterrupted play with your kiddos. So thinking about following their lead, doing something that they really wanted to do. And then last week we really kind of dug a little bit deeper into the behaviors that we see in children and what are the things that we want to see a little bit more of and what are the things that we would like to see a little less of. So in thinking about that and kids' behaviors, especially thinking about your own child, does anyone feel comfortable enough to kind of share anything that they maybe have noticed in the last week or so about their children's behaviors? You can go ahead and
Um,
unmute. Yeah, go ahead, Reedy.
I can share. This is Reedy. After the couple sessions that we had, I was able to just kind of, put my phone away and put other things away and just like focus on her. And she started doing this thing where she wanted to crawl. And so I was acting like I was crawling too. So she thought it was so funny. So she would just laugh. And then, so I would do it some more. So it's kind of like a chasing game that she wants to play. And then I would do the same where I'm acting like I want her to chase me. And she would actually follow. Like she wanted to do that. And then another thing that we did was I I was done with my the Swiffer box that I had, so she wanted to play with it, and I washed it out, and I just put some stuff in it, like some balls that she can play with and stuff. So she gave me the balls, and I started like juggling with them, and she thought that was hilarious, and she was just laughing, and I just thought it was like, wow, like I never knew that just giving that attention and just making things up, you know, from my mind just would just make her laugh and for her to enjoy it.
And it's that connection, right? I mean, it's the idea that you're spending some time really connected to what's going on, right?
Absolutely.
You know, and honestly, that's what kids need. They need to feel connected. They need to feel connected to you as their parent. And when we do slow down and we put the phones away, it does make a difference. And what you'll see, hopefully, and if you continue this, I think what you'll see is that when you need something from your child, kind of like what Christine was saying a couple weeks ago, like when you're sitting in the grocery store line and you need to get through that, you might find it actually goes a little bit better.
Absolutely. And I think we've just become so dependent on other things when we become bored that it kind of hinders our creativity.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, you can take an empty box and fill it with balls, and all of a sudden it becomes something fun that you enjoy doing together. And it's a box and balls. So it's
Yeah, exactly. And she was just I just thought it was funny. She was just holding up the box and trying to make the ball go one side to another side.
Oh, wow.
And it was just funny to me. So I was just watching her and I'm like, wow, this is fun.
it is, you know what? It is fun if you can kind of take that step back and just enjoy kids being kids. It really can help. Anybody else have any feedback about getting that to spend that time? I know it's hard. I know it's hard to remember to do it. I know it's hard to find the time to do it. Um, those are challenges that, I think you just kind of maybe have to take a step back and think about. But anybody else have any
Yeah,
feedback?
uh,
Yeah.
I I I spent time with my son, some doing some craft or making some painting, drawing, and he really likes that. He really likes
Nice.
to draw and coloring with me, and he enjoyed it so much. It makes him feeling so happy. I see that, and it makes me feel happy too.
It, And that's a really good point, that it's the idea of the enjoyment of just the time together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the activity is fun. It's not really, this is not really about what the activity is, right? Like you can, like you said, you could be painting, you can be doing
Mm-hmm.
anything, but you're spending the time together. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. And I think, again, I can say this with a lot of confidence that if you continue to do this, if you really put the effort in now, while your kids are little, don't wait for them to get to be 16 and go, well, look at this bratty kid. I'm not sure where this happened. Well, it happened because you didn't put the time in that you needed to when they were little. So
Mm-hmm.
invest now while they're
Yeah.
little.
I will keep trying. I will
Yeah.
keep trying. Yeah. To do that,
And
to
like,
continue.
it's hard. I mean, believe me, I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to do, but I can tell you that if you do invest when your kids are little like this, that what you will find is it is easier
Mm-hmm.
as they get into their
Day
teens
by day.
because you
Yeah.
build a
Yeah. Yeah.
relationship.
Day by day, it will be easier. Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Today we're going to go a little deeper into kind of figuring out like meanings of behavior, and I kind of wish that we always knew. We don't always know exactly where kids' behavior is coming from, but oftentimes if we understand development, we start to figure out what's going on with them. We're going to talk today about making our expectations of them very clear. We're going to talk about developing household rules, which to me, this is like one of my favorite sessions because really strongly believe in creating these household rules and making your expectations very clear makes a huge difference in how things function in your house. So we'll work on that today as well. All right, so we're going to keep going here. So we're going to start out with this video, and I'm really hoping it plays well for you. We practiced a little bit, so we're hoping that it comes off across. But what I want to show you is it's kind of a struggle between a mother and her child. So you'll notice that obviously you can already see from this picture that he's on the ground. They're trying to get into the library. So I just want to give you a little bit of a setup here that she's trying to get him to just walk into the library with her.
I was just going to say too, Karen. Well, go ahead.
We got 10 seconds, and we're going inside. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, next inside. Come on, stand up. Stand up.
Okay. It's kind of painful to watch for me as many times as I've seen it. Before we get into this part, I just wanted to kind of have you think about a time that you may have run into this kind of situation with your own child. And maybe not exactly about going into the library, but it could be kind of anything that you get your child. It's not unusual at this age. That child looked like it was about 3, maybe 4 at the most. Kind of throwing himself on the ground and refusing to do what mom wants him to do. So is there a time that you can think of with your own child that you've maybe had this kind of a struggle? I would say probably every parent has at some point. So don't feel like if you're thinking to yourself, yes, like no one else is thinking that. Probably everybody here is thinking, yep, I remember that time when. And so I want you to think about that time when, and as we kind of move through this material, maybe you can think about how you might be able to have approached that situation a little differently. So we'll kind of move through this material and help you to kind of figure it out for yourselves, what you might want to do next time. So this next slide, I'll just be completely honest with everybody that I'm not a huge believer in timeouts. I'm not saying that they don't work. I think there are some people that they work wonderfully for. And if you use timeouts with your kids and they work, I would say keep doing what you're doing because it seems to be working. Most often I talk with parents, and when we talk about timeouts, what I hear is, what my question is always, does the behavior happen again? And typically I get the answer of, well, yes. And then they go to timeout again. And I said, and how many times does that have to happen before they learn something from it? And so one of the issues that I have with timeout, although I'm going to tell you about if you're going to do it, the best way to do it, is that it's that the idea of you're pushing a child away and they're not really learning anything from it. It might be a good time for like a break. Like, I don't like to call it a timeout, but I say to kids, maybe you just need a break for a minute. We both need a break, and then we'll come back together. If you choose to use timeout, though, these are really specific things that need to happen for you to be able to use it. So you always want to start with a brief explanation, and then you guide the child to wherever the timeout is, a chair or whatever. Now, personally, I've never seen a child be guided to a timeout location willingly or calmly. One of the big pieces is, as the adult, you need to remain calm. Very often when there's a situation where things are heightened, the adult doesn't remain very calm. You want to set a timer, and you have to remember that it's usually around a minute per age, so per year. So if you think you've got a 2-year-old, it might be a 2-minute timeout. If you've got a 3-year-old, it's a 3-minute timeout. A 4-year-old is a 4-minute timeout. So kind of keep it around that time. That's all it should be. It's not you're going to your room for the rest of the day. You set a timer so that when the timer goes off, that the child can then return. And if the child leaves before that, you're supposed to return them to the chair or wherever the timeout space is. When the time is over, you should let the child return to their activity and provide positive, calmly stated, brief reminders about how to use appropriate skills. It sounds lovely. I don't think I've ever seen a timeout that looked like that. So for me, it's a difficult thing to go through when we think of timeouts. This is how a timeout should look, and if you're going to use timeout, this is how it works, and this is what will make it work. Now, again, personally, I've not seen it work very well. Here's some of the common mistakes that parents typically make, and this is why, again, I don't really like it, because I look at this and I think, wow, this is usually what happens. So parents get angry, right? We get angry when our kids don't do the things that we need them to do. And so what ends up happening is we're giving the child negative attention. We're still going to give them, we're yelling at them. We're giving them negative attention, which is not helpful. So allowing other children to tease the child who's in timeout. So especially when there's siblings, oh, you have to go to timeout and you're not. And it causes like sibling kinds of issues often. And certainly I've seen it happen in childcare centers where I've seen a lot of issues of children being shamed by other children. I think that when we think about timeout, when you do it, it needs to be immediate. You don't give timeout later. Any of the consequences for behavior from children should be immediate. You don't wait till later. It's kind of like when you're training a dog. If you spank the dog after you've been gone at work all day and maybe they peed on the carpet in the morning, the dog doesn't understand the correlation between the two. It's the same thing with kids. It needs to be right then and right there. And then the idea of scolding your child is not a good idea. So thinking about the words that you use and how you use them is really important. Your body language and your tone of voice make a huge difference with kids. So again, I'm not a huge fan of this. I typically, when my kids were little, I had a habit of putting toys on timeout. So like if they were fighting over a toy, or if my son would hit my daughter over the head with a toy, kind of a thing. He used to have this big plastic Godzilla that he would take around that would like bully their way into the Barbies playing. So Godzilla would go on timeout. So I typically did that. And oftentimes with my kids, instead of putting them in timeout, I would put them in separate rooms. Just you go play in that room, you go play in that room, and just stay away from each other for a while. So it wasn't that anyone was in trouble. It was just that we all need a break from each other. So I found a lot of other ways that I found were more successful when my kids were little than timeouts. But again, if you're using timeout and kids really learn from it, they really actually change their behavior, then I would say go ahead and use it. But if you don't see the behavior change and you see the behavior over and over and over again, it's not working. Okay, so Christine's going to tell us about another alternative solution, which is much better.
Yeah. So one of the things, just as Karen was talking about the whole timeout thing, that I think one of the reasons why neither one of us love it is because it's kind of the opposite of what the whole rest of this course is, which is really focusing on your child and spending attention on the behaviors you want to see. One of the things, this is a great research-based curriculum like we've shared with you from before. One of the things, though, is because of the research base, we have to show every slide in its entirety as they've written it for us, which is fine. We're allowed to add to. The next 2 slides are something that we've added to. But that's why we do go over timeout. I did used to occasionally use a kind of variation of timeout in the classroom with young children. I would call it a minute away because the words timeout kind of already sometimes send kids into like a meltdown kind of state. So I'd say, you know what? I see that we're throwing sand again and it's going to get in someone's eyes. So we might meet a minute away from the sand table. So let's you and I step away together for a minute or 2. And then we'll step back into play and see if we can play more appropriately, right? Then it wouldn't start off with that meltdown piece like we just saw the woman in the video having that complete meltdown. Because that's what you want to avoid if at all possible. Here is one way that hopefully you can avoid the meltdown. I am going to copy and paste a link. And this link is these 6 steps to conflict resolution. And then we're just going to kind of go over them a little bit. And I'm just going to explain a little bit about what we used these 6 steps for. It is a part of a preschool curriculum, the 6 steps to conflict resolution. And it's something that I'm very familiar with. It's not super easy to use, but it really gets a desired results. So the first couple are very easy to do. It's approach calmly and stopping any hurtful actions. So you want to approach and you want to kind of put yourself between 2 kids if there's a conflict going on, right? And so and that can be also to, thank you, Karen. That can also be to themselves as well, if they're harming themselves or if they're harming a toy. So if it's not even just 2 people on their own, but you want to approach calm. You don't want to go in like, because that's just going to rise the situation. You want to be calm when you walk in. You want to acknowledge a child's feelings. You need to say something simple as like, you look really sad. You look upset. You might need to hold any object in question that might be causing the issue. So you might need to say, I'm just going to take this away while we figure out what happened, okay? Your 3rd step is a gather information step. You want to ask, what happened? What's the problem? What's going on? You don't want to ask, why did you do this? Young children don't understand that concept at all. And my parents used to do, the generation above me did this all the time. Why would you do this? And it didn't make any sense at all because we don't know when we're 3. We don't know why we do it. So that's not really a great answer or a great question to ask. The better question is what's going on? What's happening? The 4th is restate the problem, just to make sure you fully understand it. So you want to say, oh, so she took the shovel from you and you wanted the shovel. The next one is ask for solutions and choose together. What can we do? Do you have any ideas? What's a good solution? You might need to work together on this a little bit, especially for a young child. Someone who's 2 or below, this is going to be really hard to get to this stage. But even 3-year-olds I've seen successfully be able to say, they're going to start out, a 3-year-old's going to start out and say, I just want it. Okay, but your brother just wants it too. So what's a way we can make this work? You might have to do a little bit more encouraging and figuring it out. But once your child's 4, 5, 6, 7, they can really do this pretty successfully. They understand a little bit more. The sixth piece is really important too, that you want to stay close and be prepared to give more support. So if something works successfully, and you got a good result and it worked okay for the first 20 seconds, don't go into another room quite yet, but you might be able to see that it's going to be successful. So I know that sounds like a lot of steps, but you'd be surprised, even just those first 3 are really helpful. And those 3 you can do with anybody. Anybody. Step number 2, to say, you look really sad. Wow, you're really sad about that. That goes really far, especially when you do it genuinely. You can't be like, well, that's sorry, it's just too sad. You have to be genuine about that one, right? This is like, you look really sad. You look really upset. What can we do, right? So those first 3 can be really helpful. We give you all 6. I suggest just to throw them on your fridge, maybe, if you have a fridge that you can still stick a magnet to, and just kind of glance at them every once in a while, and when you hear something kind of arising, to jump on in with that. Does that make sense at all? All right. We can go to the next slide, Karen. Okay, this is a great slide. You want to make your expectations clear. You want to tell your child what to do instead of what not to do. Sometimes we'll yell something out like, stop yelling. So simply by us yelling it and then saying, stop yelling, they're hearing the yelling and they're hearing you yell. Instead, if you want to quietly say, use your voice like this, you'll be surprised how much more you can get done by just saying, use your voice like this. Bullet 2 is to clearly and simply state what you expect your child to do. One instruction at a time. Put your cars in the bin, please. Not just clean up. Because clean up sounds like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. But put your cars in the bin. That's a clear direction, and it's like, oh, okay, I can do that. And if your child's giving you an issue about that, if they don't want to put their cars in the bin, maybe it's something that you can say, put your cars in the bin while I put the airplanes in the hangar. So that you're giving yourself a job to do as well. Or sometimes you can even give them a choice. Do you want to put the cars in the bin, or do you want to put your airplanes in the hangar? Sometimes giving them a choice like that can be really helpful. You want to have age-appropriate expectations. My youngest daughter, when she was in high school, one of the expectations that I wanted her to have was I wanted her to think about the house as if she owned it as well. So anything that was going to be coming up, when the garbage was emptied, she should just automatically bring the garbages in without me saying, Caroline, the garbage are empty. Can you bring them in? It was a really unrealistic expectation because she'd never owned a house. She wasn't a renter. She was just a kid. And I used to kind of have to check myself and be like, that is an unrealistic expectation. She would do what I asked when I asked her to do something, but she didn't want to do it. It wasn't like her thought process. So you have to be really, this is throughout life. Expectations have to be real. Your 3-year-old is not going to share. It is not in their nature to share things, and that's okay. They'll get there when they're 5 or 6. It's not a realistic expectation. Okay, so one of the other things we want to talk about is children don't respond well to contractions. They don't understand the can'ts and the don'ts. Also, the word don't in general, we don't understand well. If you think in your head, I'm just going to say this, don't think about a pink elephant in a tutu. What are you doing right now? You're thinking about a pink elephant in a tutu. Simply by saying don't in front of it doesn't stop the behavior from happening. You're still going to think of it. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, so now we're going to get a little bit more in depth in this. So I love trying to figure out what behavior tells you.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Do you have any, this is sort of tangential so you can get back, but do you have any resources on what chores are age appropriate?
Yeah. I actually just, I just sent it to a parent, so I actually I have it probably still sitting on my desktop. I can send it out to all of you, definitely.
Thank you. I know it's sort of unrelated, so we don't have to go
No,
into
it's
depth.
very related.
It's
I think
very related.
yeah, yeah.
For sure. Okay, so we're going to dig a little bit more into what behavior tells you, because every behavior your child displays has a meaning. We're going to break it down a little bit, and if I know that probably a lot of you didn't print out your books, but if you could go to your book when you have a chance online and go to activity 9, this is really thinking about what happened before, what the behavior was, and what happened after. In preschool classrooms, we use these things a lot to kind of say what was the trigger, what happened before, and then what was the reaction that we all had, right? So if you get a chance to take a look at this seat, it has a whole bunch of options. So what happened before? I told or asked my child to do something was taken away from them, whatever happened before. There's a category that says other. Definitely, if it could be nothing on this list, but there could be something that happened right before that is going to make something click in your head. And then knowing about what happened during it, what the behavior was. The behavior we're thinking about can be something like someone, throwing what we would call a tantrum or being really upset, but it also can be a child shutting down and stopping talking to you. That's another kind of concerning behavior too. And so anything that is like, gosh, I don't know if that should be what they would normally do, just think about it. You can think about it after the fact, kind of break it down into this sheet. You can do as many of these as you like. I think our book has like 3 or 4 in them if we print it out and give it to them. So this is not just a one and done kind of thing. So each time your child has a significant behavior, after it's over, write it down. I want to tell you a really super quick story. I used to have a child in my classroom who had mild autism, and one of his behaviors that he would sometimes do he would bite. And I couldn't figure out what happened before the biting, what it was. After a little bit of taking a look at the times and what was going on, we kind of investigated and saw he was getting hungry. And so he would bite at a time that he was hungry, when he hadn't had enough for breakfast, when there was something going on. He didn't have the ability to tell us that because he might not have even known that that's what it was. And so we started noticing this, and we started giving him a drink of water at like 10 a.m. every day. We would just pull him to the side and we'd be like, do you want a drink? And he'd take a drink of water, and it literally stopped the issue. It seems like a silly, ridiculous thing. I can't stress enough that it made a huge difference. So sometimes figuring out what's triggering a behavior, you might see something change. Now, obviously biting is a little bit more extreme that some of you probably aren't dealing with, but it can happen. It can happen in all different kinds of child. Maybe some of you are dealing with it. So that just gives you a little sample about kind of what something like this can do. Karen, you look like you want to add something to that.
So I use an acronym. It's not in these slides. I just use it when I talk with parents. I use an acronym. It's called HALTS. So is your child hungry? Are they angry? Did something happen that made them angry? Are they lonely? Do they just need hugs, love, and something? Are they thirsty? And are they sleepy? So when I think of HALTS and I think of all that list, when I start to think of kids' behavior, I kind of run through that list in my head. And oftentimes, like you said, Christine, kids are hungry.
Yeah.
or they didn't get enough sleep last night. And so I think about those behaviors, but I also think of adults are the same way. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many times have you heard about people being hangry, and there's Snickers has a whole commercial on it. So I just think of that whole idea of, when kids are hungry, they're going to act up. When adults are hungry, we act up. So that acronym seems to help me a lot when I'm trying to figure out kids' behaviors. That's usually where I start. And then we kind of move deeper into that after. So it's just something to think about as you're moving through these activities. And there are several of these sheets. And so I would say use them all. Use them all if that helps.
Do you want to hear a story about my terrible day on Tuesday?
Yes, go ahead, tell us.
So I needed to work and my baby was napping and my 4-year-old was supposed to be playing independently, but she hadn't been forced to play independently in like 2 weeks. And so suddenly I was like, because she normally watches like at 10 a.m. she watches TV, and ideally I want her to play for 30 minutes by herself, and then at 10:30 she gets to. But I was like, you have to play by yourself, and she like lost her mind like immediately, and then I just like snapped. I just like yelled at her, like, which was a really dramatic response from me. And then she started yelling at me, and then we were yelling at each other. It was great. And then I woke up my baby, obviously. So then I was even more mad. And like the 4-year-old said, like, I don't even want to play. I just want to go into my room and cry, which was tragic.
Yeah.
So this was on Tuesday. So, you know, I got the baby and I was like, oh my God, I'm so tired because my baby has been up all night because she's teething and I'm frustrated. And so I yelled at her because I'm tired, right? Like I don't normally yell.
Mhm.
And so then I had to like go in and apologize to her. I apologized and, you know, explained to her, I was like, you know, I'm sorry and I shouldn't have yelled, and, you know, left it at that because I don't think you should say, but, you know, just apologize. And then the next day, and then we like turned the day around. We went out, we left the house, which is what one should always do when things are unraveling. But then yesterday was the day after, and it was 10 o'clock, and I was like, it's time for you to play independently. And she was like, okay, I understand. And was like totally like,
She learned.
she did. I mean, my meltdown was not the way to do it, but it
Right.
was just interesting because it was like both of us were one of those things, you know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
I exasperated the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And you're the adult, so it's your job.
it was my fault. I felt terrible.
But
we had
but
to-
I love that you apologized. I love that you went back and respected your child enough to say, you know what? I lost my cool. I'm sorry. Because what we expect of kids is that same thing, right? We want them to come back to us and say, oh, I'm sorry, Mom, yesterday I lost my cool and I yelled at you. If we want that behavior from them, we have to model it ourselves. So just the fact that you apologize to her says a whole lot. A whole lot.
And also, I think I was trying to think about what the cause was of her behavior. And I think her cause was not that she was hungry, angry, or any of those things, but that I had not been clear about my expectations, right? Like I had let things slip for 2 weeks. And suddenly I was like, well, this is the way I planned it 2 weeks ago. So
She didn't know your plans.
yeah, she was unaware.
Yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I think also the really good piece about apologizing to your daughter is that it allows people to make mistakes by saying, you know, if you genuinely go in, and I think it's really good that you didn't try and apologize in the moment. So you waited a little bit and you went in a little bit later and said, I'm really sorry, you know. I think that's huge because I think that gives, it explains the meaning of how you apologize and why you apologize, and that you didn't put the but after it. So well done. Everyone's going to have moments like those. We've all had them. Every single one of us have had parenting moments that we're not what I would call proud of, right? That's okay. Things like that. Parenting is tough. Like Karen said at the very first session that we had, parenting is one of the hardest things you can do. So well done. Thank you for sharing that with us, Courtney. I appreciate that. All right, we have one more little activity we want to get through here a little bit. And this is really one of my favorites because it's something that I'm going to ask for interaction from. So get ready, people. We're gonna need a little chatting. So in your workbook again, in a workbook activity 10, we really want to talk about reversing our thought processes from going from a negative to a positive. So instead of saying, stop yelling, really want to say, use a voice like this. Use a voice like this. A lot of times we'll say, use your inside voice. If you're saying use your inside voice, not using an inside voice, a child doesn't know what that means. So you have to be very specific. Use your inside voice. Use the voice like I'm talking right now. Try that. Sometimes I would say things in my classroom like, ooh, your voice is hurting my ears. It's my ears. My ears don't like it. Can you try it like this? And so when you put the kind of blame on yourself, on your ears, then it's not a blame that it's just like they have to be extra careful around you, right? So just a thought to think about. So does anyone have a thought about what they could say instead of don't throw your toys? Any thoughts out there? Just somebody yell it out.
Put your toys away nicely and gently, please.
Yep. Put them away nicely. Drop them in the bin. Perfect. How about stop bothering your sister? Anyone got one?
It's kind of a tough one.
A little bit.
Focus on your toy? Play with your toy? I don't know.
Yeah. So you'd want to focus on whatever it is because stop bothering in my head, I picture when I was a kid and, somebody would put their finger right to you and they'd say, I'm not touching you. There's really nothing wrong with that behavior. They're really not touching them, but they're bothering them, right? So focus on your own stuff is a great way to focus on what you got going on instead of what they got going on, right? How about don't spill your milk? That's a little bit easier. Does someone got one for that one? Maybe something like careful at the table, careful with your, keep your milk on the table instead of on the ground or wherever it might be. Stop whining is one of my favorites because it totally reminds me of when I used to teach. And whining was one of my things. It just used to trigger in me. It used to be a thing for me that would start off my head like, oh, we're going to have a whining day. And so I used to always say to my kids, ooh, I like it when voices go up at the end instead of down. And I would love that kids would say, because they don't understand what whining means. Kids would sometimes come up to me and they'd be like, Mrs. Hodge. And then someone would remind them, she doesn't like it when voices go down. So they'd come up and they'd be like, Mrs. Hodge. And they'd try and bring it up. It's just one of my favorite memories. I turned around that stop whining so that it would make me giggle all the time because they just try so hard to not have it go down. Again, I'd always blame it on my ears. My ears don't like that sound. So that's a good way to turn that one around. Be good is kind of interesting because what does that mean? Be good and be nice. They aren't specific enough. You need to be a little bit more specific. So instead of be good, you might want to say, oh, you were kind to your sister when you gave her that. So give them an exact explanation of what you mean. I liked that behavior. Because be good is just too vague. Same thing with be nice. And then cut it out is, sometimes that's something that people will use. But again, cut what out? You aren't really very specific. So, ooh, please stop throwing that, right? Or I guess we wouldn't want to say stop throwing that because that's stop. But keep the toys down, whatever it might be. Does that make sense? Cool biz. Anyone have any other great suggestions for that? Thoughts? Anyone have anything that trips you up at home that you don't know how to turn it around positively? Maybe we can problem solve as a group a little bit.
I do like all your voice suggestions because, I try to use more positive language with my daughter about, can you please speak quietly? It's, first thing in the morning, things like that. And sometimes she'll just say, I like talking loud. And so these give me some other options to use in those moments to see how they work.
Good. Let us know if it helps at all. We can always try and brainstorm as a group again if there's something else that might help. You might be surprised though, just a couple of those little things might give you a little bit extra of peace. Reedy, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to ask, Rena does this thing where, um, I don't know, like she has this thing where she wants to go touch the garbage now, like because she sees me throwing things in there. And because sometimes I let her play with like empty cartons and stuff, so I don't know what else to say other than no, don't touch the garbage. I try to show like yucky, it's bad, and but I don't know what else to do.
Is there maybe something else that you could say, like, let's touch this instead? So if your garbage is in a cupboard, could you say, touch this cupboard or touch something else instead? Karen, do you have a thought too?
I was just going to say, so I actually have a bin in my my therapy office that I keep things that are technically stuff I probably could throw away, but I always look at it as an area of kids could be creative and use items that I recycled kind of items. So in it are things like empty containers, empty paper towel, toilet paper, paper towel rolls. When I get something in the mail, like the packaging stuff that just, it's literally a basket of junk. And kids can use it to be creative and do art projects and stuff, but maybe having like, I don't want to say necessarily a recycling bin, but something where it is kind of a junk thing that she could play with or go into, that would be the okay place for her if she wants to like rummage through that kind of thing instead of the garbage. So it's kind of like a replacement item. That's kind of
That's
where my
actually,
mind goes.
yeah, that's actually a good idea because I find myself like if I have an empty box or something, instead of trying to have her touch the garbage, I just kind of give her because the box we don't put in the garbage, we
Yeah,
just leave it
yeah,
out. So yeah,
yeah. No,
but
I
those
like
two
that.
are good. Those are great suggestions from both.
I tend to lean on the idea of replacement things a lot. What could I do? Okay, if I don't want this, what am I to do instead of? And so you start to get creative. You start to think of different things. Um,
Yeah, thank
yeah.
you. That's a good way to think about it.
What are the pros and cons of like if my daughter is mad and wants to hit, like saying, "Oh, we don't hit me, we hit this pillow." Is that encouraging hitting still, or is that like
I would say go ahead and do that because what she likely wants to do is expel some energy that's inside of her body. And there are positive ways we can do. I mean, adults, look at how many adults go to the gym. That's just a way of just really, I mean, yeah, it's good for your body, but it's
not
it's
something I relate to?
yeah, it's what I'm thinking is that like, I see people in my neighborhood now walking more than ever. And I'm like, because we can't sit anymore. We need to get that energy out. So oftentimes that's what kids do is they have this energy that's inside of them and they're kind of got it all bottled up and they don't know what to do with it. So they hit a person, they hit whatever walks by. So think about what are the alternatives to it. It's thinking about, is there something she could hit instead? Or does she need to just run? Does she need to get her body moving? And, again, what can you do to expel the energy that's in there?
Or does she need to yell? Sometimes it's like even just because I know, Andy, like you were talking about earlier, that your daughter sometimes likes to use a loud voice. Sometimes that's okay. And if you want to use a loud voice, we're going to do it today at noon when I have my lunch break, and we're going to go outside and you can yell. So, I mean, you can set yourself up in the same way, Courtney. I don't want you to hit me, but you can hit this pillow. And if you're concerned about like she's just going to become overwhelmed with it and it's going to be something like she's going to if you're concerned about her increasing that behavior, you can even like set a timer. You can be like, you got a minute. Go ahead, hit it as hard as you can for a minute. Because then it's not, it might give enough of that energy release so that you're not standing around all day with that going on. Does that make sense? Because I know I had a very persistent daughter. My oldest daughter was very persistent. And I could see her doing that for like an hour. I would be like, I don't know if this is good anymore. I feel like it's too much. So I mean, I think that there are some ways that you can kind of adjust it. and that might help. And even to Karen's point, you might even schedule a time and a minute a day that she can hit something, right? Because it might be enough. It might be something you can kind of schedule in. I don't know. Just my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Creating structure around it. Yeah. That's kind of actually that helps me kind of move into this next piece too, because we want to think about having structure, right? We want to think about what are the ways that we can structure things for kids, because kids really do want rules and structure, believe it or not. They really do crave it. They like the idea of having boundaries. So there are, though, rules when you create rules. So I want you to think of that. When kids are young, you really don't want to have too many rules. I start out with most families saying 3 to 5. 3 to 5 rules is really all you need. And classrooms can do the same thing. And so I often suggest that in classrooms. You always want to state it in a positive way, though. So it's not don't do this and don't do that. It's if you've got problems with kids hitting each other, you say, we all keep our hands and feet to ourselves. That's our rules. We keep our hands and feet and our bodies to ourselves. That's one rule in our house. So that in itself is saying what we want to see, right? So we really do want to see it. And what does the behavior look like? Well, when you're keeping your hands and feet to yourself, your hands are in your lap or whatever you might want to say. Don't use too many words though. And try to pick rules that you can use in a lot of situations. So you're doing this at home, but you also want to have that same behavior when you're at church or when you go to grandma's or when you're at the grocery store. So we still want to see your hands and feet to yourself, whether you're at home, at grandma's, or at the grocery store, wherever you are. We don't touch other people. So it's the idea of thinking about what are those issues that are the most challenging for you and how do you set some structure around them. So let me give you a few different examples. So in thinking about this, clean up after yourself. That's nice, but kind of like what Christine was saying earlier was that, clean up has different meanings to different people. The younger you are, the less you understand what clean up is. So thinking about how you have to really be more specific with that one. Use an inside voice. Again, going back to the idea of, we'd have to really have some good examples of what an inside voice is for kids to really be able to follow that. Ask before using something that isn't yours. Personally, if you've got troubles with that in your house where kids are taking things from each other's rooms or things like that, that might be something you want to think about. Using words to solve problems. Again, those are kind of big words to use in that, but we use words. We don't hit each other is ultimately what it's saying. So as we think about creating these rules, you really want to make sure that you're creating rules that you can have in your house that are household rules, but that means you as the adult has to follow them as well, right? So make sure that you're the model for this behavior. So here are some things that they wrote. Again, what do you think of these rules? So what do you think about being nice to everyone? Is that a good rule to have in your house? Is it specific enough? That's what I wrote. Go ahead.
Not specific.
It's not specific. What does being nice mean? When you're 3 or 4, being nice may not have the same definition as it does when you're an adult. So you got to be careful with that. Don't tease or hit. What do you think of that one?
Don't.
It's using don't, right? So we're saying don't tease or hit, but what do you want me to do? Right? So again, we have to go back and think about how we're stating them. Put your laundry in the hamper. If that's an issue at your house,
That's a very specific rule.
It's very specific. And it might be an issue at your house. I know my husband's laundry doesn't always make it to the hamper. So I think about that if this is an issue in your house with your kids, you might want to make it one of your rules. If it's not, then you might not. It's not necessarily a rule that you take with you anywhere, is it? You're not going to have to, when you're at church, you don't have to worry about putting your laundry in the hamper or when you're at grandma's. So it's just, you have to really think about, again, what are those things that you need to worry about. So if you take a look in your handouts, so what you'll see is number 11 and number 12. And so number 12 really is about thinking about how to create those rules. It gives you step by step. What are the things you need to think about as you're creating household rules, right? So it really talks about teaching them. You don't just set a rule up and go, there it is. So you have to think about how are you going to teach that rule? And then you have to think about reviewing the rule. They're not going to get it right away, but don't give up. You set the rules, you keep them there, and you keep going. You don't give up. You continue to practice them. This is one of the things that we forget to do is we need to notice when they're actually doing them and celebrate those successes. So I literally just did this activity with a family that I'm doing therapy with, and it's two brothers. Well, there's 3 kids, but there's 2 brothers, and they are having issues with one another. And so I had the 2 of them sit down with me and create rules. And so we created some family rules. And one of the rules was that they had to leave their mom alone when she was doing work. So literally when she had a meeting, in a virtual meeting. And so they created 5 rules. And one of the things that they did for a week then was they kept a chart of each other. And they didn't say when people were breaking the rules. They had to keep track of when people were doing the right thing. So if mom was on a virtual meeting, they would check to see, they were checking each other, they were checking their sister to see who was actually leaving mom alone while she was working on that. So it was kind of with these 2 boys, it became like almost, I don't want to say a competition, but what they were doing was they were almost like in competition with each other to see who could be better, who could really follow the rules. And they kept track of it for a week. And then we reviewed it the next week so that they could see like what were their problems, where did they have trouble with it. These are really, to me, this is like really good stuff that you need to like put in place. And then again, you keep it in place and you keep going. I'm going to show you some really quick examples. Literally, I got a lot of these on just off of Google. So they're not necessarily people I know. But these are what you see in this first one is I like these, except that they're very, very broad. So they're a little bit too broad for me. You know, share nicely, use inside voices, clean up. Clean up again means nothing to a 3 or 4-year-old. I like this idea that the Stever family rules wrote, and I love that everybody in the family signed it. So they all sat down together, created the rules, and then they signed it. So it was be gentle, use your manners, sit at the table for meals, and then they talked about body safety because obviously that must have been an issue in their house. When we think about schools, these are often the rules that we see in schools, you know, looking eyes, listening ears, quiet mouths, helping hands, walking feet. Super simple. And I would say if your kids are in school, probably not as relevant for virtual, but if they are actually in like a preschool program, check to see what their rules are there. Because the more overlap that you have, the more likely it's going to be that kids are going to figure this out and latch onto it. So when you're doing this is one thing that it's really, really helpful. Remember that really young kids can't read. So you can write as many rules as you want, but they're going, yeah, that's just a bunch of letters on a piece of paper. I don't understand what any of that means. So what you're going to really want to do is take pictures. You're going to get out your phone. You're going to want to take a picture of your child doing what you would like them to do. And then you're going to post it. So you're going to want to somehow get some kind of a poster board and put it up, you know, in a relevant spot in your house, your kitchen, your living room, wherever. And so what you want to show is what you'll see here on the bottom here is a little boy going through and actually cleaning up his toys. And so mom took a picture of him cleaning up his toys. So that's what she wants to see him do. The second picture is him actually throwing his garbage in the garbage can. If that's an issue and you want to make sure that's taken care of at your house, get out your camera and take a picture. So it really, again, so if you've got 3 to 5 rules, you've got pictures next to those rules of what they are. You post them up in your kitchen, living room, wherever you decide to do it. You review them regularly. And when I say regularly, it's not just once a week. Regularly means maybe several times a day, at least to start. And then eventually you can kind of back off. But ideally, what I'd love to see is when kids start reminding you what the rules are. That's when you really know you've made it. When they start to tell you, or they check in with each other. Actually, siblings in a rivalry thing will check in with each other anyway. But I think that's just important to keep in mind. So what we want you to do this week for practice is to do those pieces where we talked about of really looking at what that challenging behavior is, what happened before, what the behavior was, and then what happened after. Keep track of those because we're going to do something with those next week. So keep track of those so that we can talk about what we're going to do with those and figure out some solutions for those problems. And then we want you to really think about developing those household rules. So as a family, sit down together and create them. Even 3-year-olds can be part of that process. 2 is a little bit iffy, but definitely 3 and 4-year-olds can actually help create rules.
I have a question. Tell me if this is an unrealistic. At what point can I expect that my child will not have a tantrum when she doesn't get her way? Is for the year or no?
No.
Okay.
No, but you should see.
I mean, I would hope it would lessen. Go ahead, Christine.
That's what I was going to say. You should see them lessening a little bit in length. Maybe not severity, but in length. They should be able to like pull it together. And I feel like the story that you told us earlier today about the next day, her saying, okay, I got to play by myself, means she's really there. She's really thinking, you know, that's what I would see as like a positive sign that she's able to control herself a little bit more. But realistically, some kids will definitely still have what we would call a tantrum. They still will, it's going to happen.
Is it a fair expectation to say to a 4-year-old, like, you are 4, you can't scream and cry every time I say no? Or should I still expect? Because, like, I don't want to, like, tell her she can't cry, right? Like, I don't want to tell her she can't feel what she feels.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also just, like, I just feel like every time she, like, it's like, here's an example. All right, Lil, we got to, I don't know, like, we're going to brush our teeth right now and go to bed. And she's like, I want 10 more minutes. And I'm like, I'm sorry, no, we're going to brush our teeth right now and go to bed. And then she's like freaking out.
Right.
That's not a great example, but still, she does cry a lot when I say no.
Right. So one of the things that you might want to start trying to think about is trying to set yourself in a situation where you can say yes more often. So one of the things, when you know that's going to be an issue, whether it's brushing your teeth or whatever, you always want to say 10 minutes before before it's bedtime, you want to say, do you want to brush your teeth now or in 10 minutes? It's your call. It's your choice. What do you want to do? They're always going to choose the extra 10 minutes, always. And so then when you give them that choice, though, then the second time you can say, this is what we agreed upon, right? One of the really nice things about setting up those rules is that, and I know we're going a minute over, I'm sorry about that, but one of the really nice things about setting up those rules for your house is that you can hold yourself accountable too. And when you hold yourself accountable, you can say that out loud. So if your rule might be that after you're done with dinner, you have to put all of your cups and plates away or whatever it might be, and I'm sitting out with my cup at the end of the night, I might say, oh, I don't want to have to get up from the TV to put my cup away, but I know that's a rule. So you want to put yourself in the position where you have to do things that you don't necessarily want to do either, but you want to say that out loud. So the rules situation might help you with this too, but that would be my suggestion for trying to get to those situations before they happen, would be my thought.
Yeah.
And I love your helper behind you so much. Like...
That is a loose term, helper. She's got some terrifying clippers here, so.
Keep in mind while you're doing these activities this week as well, that doesn't mean you stop spending that 10 minutes a day with your kids. Yep. You're still going to do that. You're going to do that forever now. That's just part of your daily routine. So keep spending that uninterrupted 10 minutes of time, and then at another time you're going to make these household rules with them and work on that. But you still want to spend that one-on-one time with them.
Yep.
That's how you're building this rapport and relationship and attachment. Important. Sound good, everyone? Got your work to do this week? All right. Next week we're going to tackle all of those pieces that you observe in the behavior. So seriously keep track of it so that we can start working on them. Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you. I'm glad you all came, and we'll see you next week.